You're listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and the interview subject I've got coming up for you is Lawrence Blatt. Now, the reason for the conversation is to promote Lawrence's beautiful compositions. He is an excellent guitarist. But another thing about Lawrence, he is a very talented human being. We talk all about his endeavours outside of music through the podcast episode as well, so I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Lawrence Blatt. Here we go. That's a wonderful episode. Yep, right there. Yeah, because you've done more than I could probably mention, certainly in this podcast episode. But my gosh, got a resume that I think would make anybody blush. So I'm going to go from the top, and feel free to add, change, or remove anything that I mention here.
Sure.
I've done some Googling. Okay, so Beth sent across some information, but of course I always go a bit deeper and do the Google thing. Now, I understand you work in the field of genetics, and you also compose music, and I understand the music part of it is the reason for the conversation, but it's certainly worth mentioning everything else you do. You earned your Bachelor of Science.
So I work in biotechnology. I'm a virologist by training, but also write and produce and record music, and somehow make those two things work together.
Yeah, look, the other thing is you're a philanthropist, and you've done a lot for your alma mater as well. There's mention of an extraordinary figure there online about your gift via a foundation, I think it is, to your alma mater there. So you're certainly somebody who is very caring too, and you want to see aspects of your life that have given you so much. You want to give a lot back to that, obviously.
Yeah, we do. So my wife and I have a foundation, and we do a lot of giving. Recently, we've been quite involved in all these natural disasters that have been happening around the world, and trying to do what we can to help, in the floods and fires and all the different things that have been going on. So we try to get out there and do stuff like that. Also very involved in the Grammy Society with the Music Cares program. We do a lot with them. And that's a program that helps people that are musicians that are sort of down and out. I'm a busy person. Lots of stuff going on.
Where do you find the energy, though? I mean, I've got two kids, and I go to university in my 40s. I'm back at university because I've got a resetting my career path, if you like, and I'm becoming a journalist from working in telecommunications. But you've done an extraordinary amount already. You've achieved a lot, but you're continuing to do a lot, and we will definitely talk about the music. But where do you find the time to do everything, and the energy, probably more to the point?
I think, a lot of it just comes from a passion to want to make these things happen. You find time, I would say people have time for things that are important to them. So you find the time and you make the time. And the other thing is you try to integrate, different aspects of all of it.
Let's talk about your music then, okay? Because I've had it on in the background a fair bit over the last few weeks. And I've written down some descriptors because I won't play the music on the podcast episode, but I like to give people a visual description. Okay, so it's easy to say that it's stunningly vast and beautiful music because it is. But it's also music that moves you.
Thank you.
And it moves you in a way that conjures these wonderful visual images. And if I was to take the listener on that journey, it's the music of a light summer breeze, blue skies over a myriad of flowers. Now, that's my description, but is there anything that you'd like to change or add to that?
No, I think for me, I write music and I play music that I feel. I often get asked, what genre do you belong to? Because I do a pretty broad scope of things. And my answer is I don't even understand genres. I don't sit down and say I'm going to write a jazz piece or a new age piece or a neoclassical piece. I just sort of play what comes out. So other people can classify it, but I don't really feel it that way. And sometimes, it's just as simple as sitting down with a guitar and seeing what happens. But other times I do hear melodies and translate them to guitar.
Now, I've spoken about this next subject to a lot of people. And that's the use of mathematics to compose music. And I believe it's something that you know quite a lot about. Because Beth said that you work with
Yeah.
mathematics and you do work them into your compositions. So can you tell me how that's done?
So, first of all, if you think about it, music is a mathematical language.
Yeah, great.
So,
Yeah.
music is written on a scale, and the scale has intervals, and those intervals create chords if they're produced properly. And there's Western scales and Eastern scales and Middle Eastern scales, and I'm familiar with all of those. So, on the very basic level, music is a mathematical language. You can't escape that. In addition to that, music is played to a time signature. So all of music is really about math and counting in terms of time signatures, and then math in terms of constructing scales and chords. So from there, it's actually an easy thing to think about. One of the things that I became interested in were mathematical constants. And I don't know if you're familiar with an ancient Italian mathematician called Fibonacci.
Yeah, Fibonacci sequence.
Who actually, by the way, he actually stole his concepts from people in India and Iran, but we won't get into that. But anyway, what Fibonacci sort of brought to the Western world from the Middle East and in India was this concept that in nature, if you look, there's a mathematical sequence that keeps repeating itself. And there's something called the Fibonacci sequence, which is that you take a number and you add it to the previous number in the sequence and you get the sequence. So quite simply, Fibonacci numbers are 1, 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 1 is 3, and 3 plus 2 is 5, and you go on to infinity like that. Well, there's two things that happen. One is that if you look in nature, you look at the flowers' petals, you look at pine cones, you look at the way trees form leaves, they always form them in a Fibonacci sequence. So flowers often have 5 petals or 8 petals. So that's pretty interesting. And then if you take the ratio of 2 Fibonacci numbers, you get a number of 1.6 and repeating decimals that go out forever. And it turns out that ratio is constantly repeated in nature. So the spiral of a galaxy, or the spirals of a snail shell, or inside our ears, there's a little spiral bone in there that helps us hear. And they're all work towards Fibonacci ratios. So I thought, why not try to apply this to music? If it's a natural constant, why not try to use it in music? And so I wrote songs and tracks for the album Fibonacci's Dream, which was the second album I released. And on that album, I used Fibonacci numbers and ratios to construct melodies and patterns. And that was a pretty successful album. In fact, just this morning, somebody sent me a photo of their radio in their car. One of the tracks was playing on Sirius XM.
Cool.
So they're still playing it. And then, from there, I got interested in another mathematical or scientific concept called emergence. And what emergence is that complex patterns can emerge from simple patterns, and the most described emergence patterns is ants in a colony where they form lines and can get to food but there's no ant giving directions. It's just they're following very simple rules, and this emerges into that complexity. And so for my album called Emergence, I defined some very simple rules for where the music would go, rules about melodies. And I gave those rules to, I constructed guitar parts, and then I gave those rules to people like Charlie Bisharat, who was my violinist on the album. And so it was sort of improvisation, but based on simple rules. So it was a pretty cool experiment, and a lot of really great songs came out of that, and it was a fun album to do. Also, as
Yep.
you've seen the cover of that album, I created that pattern actually on the computer. And if you look at it from far away, it looks like it's a pretty interesting, complex shape, but actually it's just a repeating pattern of simple structures.
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there, and it's a conversation that I've had not so much on the podcast series, but certainly with a lot of people who come from a similar background to you, and they've come from a science and a mathematics background. They've asked me how I compose music. And I've said, well, look, effectively,
Yeah.
I'm my strengths are the humanities. I'm a journalist. I don't the mathematics and the science side of things. To me, it's something I've really got to work at. So it's not intuitive for me. But with people like yourself, it is intuitive. You've got that natural bent toward it. So therefore, it's a lot easier for you, I think, to insert that into the creative process, if you like. But I would love to be able to put a slide rule over a lot of the music that I've written and thought, how can I improve this using a lot of the methodologies that you've just outlined there? Because I imagine this is I wouldn't say a revolutionary way of looking at songwriting, okay, but it is certainly a very interesting way of looking at creating very interesting songs, and that's evident in the music that you've created. So for people listening out there that are a bit intimidated by the thought of introducing mathematics into their music, and they might be a bit like me in that their strengths are in the humanities and in languages, where would you suggest that they start?
Well, I think you probably know more than you think you know. So for example, you know the intervals of chords, whether you know them by precisely what they are, like a 1-3-5 chord.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you take the first note of a scale and the third note and the fifth note. So those are intervals right there that you know. And then what you could start doing is playing around with those intervals, because that's how you get some of the more interesting chords, either on piano or guitar, where instead of your simple major chord, which is 1-3-5, you might add a sixth to it or a seventh to it. And you'll see that by taking a simple chord that you already know and changing it just a bit, you can get different tonalities and different sounds where you're really not varying much at all by doing that. The other thing I like to do as a guitarist, I like to experiment with alternative tunings. And when you do that, things really open up for you in terms of your ability to get some of these more interesting chords. So some of my compositions might start out, as very simple chord progressions. And then by altering these chords, by, thinking of, okay, maybe I want to make this a minor chord. So what are the elements of the minor chord?
Yeah.
And I put those in. And so that's a way to take something you already know how to do and move it into something that's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, good points. Good points right there, yeah. And is there any apps or any online tutorials or help that you could probably suggest someone look into? Because I know there are a lot of people.
I don't know. I haven't ever tried that. So a lot of this stuff I'm just deriving on my own. So
yeah,
I would imagine there would be. I did see one thing that was pretty amazing on Facebook once. I saw somebody that you're familiar with the mathematical constant pi.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And I saw somebody take a scale, and pi can be calculated now with supercomputers to the millionth decimal,
mm-hmm.
and they simply played the numbers in pi out to like 50 decimals sequentially, and it was pretty amazing what came out of this thing.
I bet.
I wish I knew who did that, but it was pretty amazing. So I think that there are universal constants that occur, whether they're colors or sound waves. I think there are things that are universal that we can stick to by using math as a bridge to figure out how to do that.
Mm. If someone listening wanted to reach out to you and wanted to improve their compositional ability using this, could they reach out to you and ask you some questions?
Sure, yeah. I have contact information on my website, which is just lawrenceblatt.com, and my email is just lawrence@lawrenceblatt.com, so they can certainly reach out to me that way. Or on Facebook, I have my artist page there, and people can contact me that way. Also on Instagram and Twitter as well. So,
yeah, you have a great online presence, as you said. Yep. Yeah. The other thing,
so I'm trying to do that.
And look, the other thing that I couldn't help but notice being a guitarist myself is that you are an excellent guitarist. So we're talking about your ability to form shapes and chords. Outside of just picking the notes, you can actually articulate those notes very well on a fretboard. So I think your great strength is actually letting the music breathe and not filling a page with notes, a bit like Yngwie Malmsteen and a lot of these shred guitarists. You're actually somebody who is very, very considered in your application of notes. So is there anybody that inspired you as a guitarist, like a Paco de Lucia?
Absolutely. Yeah, lots of people. But I think the turning point for me in my technical ability came. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I saw this flyer literally on a like a bar billboard. That it was a master guitar class, and it was given by somebody named of Lawrence Juber, who you may know was the main guitar player for Wings. And is an incredible fingerstyle guitar player. And he just kind of opened the door for me on, first of all, before I met him, I played with a flat pick, which is great. And I still play with a flat pick. But he showed me, how to use my fingers to pick. And moreover, he's unique in that he doesn't use nails or metal picks on the tips of his fingers. He actually just uses his fingers, and that's what I do. And I think that gives a very different sound than you get with nails or metal picks on your fingers. You get a much more true tone, I think, and it gives you a little more ability to control what you're playing, because with a pick you get kind of one thing, So that was really a breakthrough working with Lawrence, and there were a number of other people in that workshop. And from there, and it took me a long time. It took me about 2 years actually to be able to play with my fingers, because it's a whole different thing than flat picking.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And you just have to do repetitive over and over again. He gave some exercises for doing that, and then you get to the point where you can do it. And some of the things I do that I credit Lawrence with is being able to play a bass line and a melody at the same time.
Yes.
That now comes pretty naturally, but when you first try it, you think, oh my God, this is impossible. So I would say for anybody wanting to make that transition, just stick to it. And, music is, you have to exercise, just like if you were learning a new skill in a sport, you have to do it every day and exercise and stick to it, and it will come.
That's the tough part. I know myself, learning new songs. I think I've got learning new songs down pat, but it's that creative element where you're wanting to add different techniques or different styles to your technique, if you like. And you've just, exactly to your point, if it's a 24-month period that it takes for you to embed some of these things, you've just got to have the discipline to sit down and do it, and also I think have the vision to be willing to want to achieve something too. And I think a lot of people in this day and age think they can watch a bloody YouTube video and it shows them, use this technique and do this 5 minute, the 5 minute technique or whatever. Excuse my language, it's bullshit. It's dedicated practice every day, and perfect practice makes perfect. Not practice makes perfect. perfect practice makes perfect. I talk to a lot of young musicians about that. It's like, okay, so where are you headed? They've got all the digital audio workstations set up. They've got all of the tools and stuff, but then they go to play. It's like, yeah, it's not quite there yet. So are you practicing? It's like, well, what do I need to do that? I can just play it a couple of measures at a time and then double it up on Pro Tools or Reason or whatever they're using. And
well, that doesn't work too well when you're playing live.
No, that's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I'm saying. And consequently, live, they're not that crash hot because they tire out. They're okay for 2 songs, and then after that, and these are only playing 8 or 9 sets. They're on 4th band on a bill or what have you. And I make a really big point of saying, look, guys, if you want to be a great guitarist, it doesn't change whether it was 1780 or 2019, meaning you've just got to practice. You've got to have the vision to understand where you're headed with it and then practice. There's no escaping it, unfortunately. Right. Really, that's just how it is, Yeah. That's why I think...
It really is a 10,000 hour thing that people talk about. I think one advantage I had was that I started playing string instruments when I was 7. So I started with classical violin, played violin and cello and classical bass. So I had that foundation. Didn't start with guitar until a little bit later, about in my teens, but it came pretty easily because I already had that dexterity of at least my left hand to be able to form chords and that kind of thing. I also think the classical training gives you a basis in musical theory and often you're writing a song and you're kind of stuck on where to go. That's where you pull out the musical theory and say, okay, You're on a G. Where do you need to go next?
That's so true.
So I think that was also a help. Yeah.
That's so true, what you just said then. When you get stuck, this is the big difference between people who understand theory and people who don't, or at least people who have access to understanding the theory, somebody around them or what have you, because we all experience creative or writer's block. We all get it. But one way of working through that is to rely on the rudimentary elements, if you like, of your craft and going back to that and sort of easing yourself back into it by applying the theory, if you like, the technique of the theory to your music. And that's a great way, I think, I've done that myself, but it's not intuitive for me. As I say, it's something I've got to go online and say, well, I'm here, and I work out what scale I've used, and then I work out what mode I've used to create songs, and then I go, well, what could you do next using these two things in combination with each other? And you come up with some pretty interesting ideas that way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, tell me about the sort of...
So,
yeah, right, you go.
Yeah, go ahead.
The sort of guitar you use, are you specific about the type of guitar you need to use? I assume it's very important to you that you need to have a certain setup and even a certain brand that you're playing because of the characteristics of a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and often, for different tunings, even different guitars are better. But I've been very fortunate to be able to play some really unique and fantastic guitars. One thing I will say though is you can go into a music store and there could be 7 Martins, all the same model, sitting in a row, and not one of them is the same.
Yeah.
This business of buying a acoustic guitar online, I would highly recommend against that. Because
agreed.
Out of those 7, there's going to be one good one, and what is a good guitar for me might not be a good guitar for you. I had a good buddy here in San Francisco. He's a flat picker, and he wanted this Koa wood guitar, and I told him, "You're not going to like it. It would work for me, but it's not going to work for you." He bought a Koa wood guitar, and about a month ago, he came to me and said, "Do you want it?" No, I don't.
Yeah.
Because if you're flat picking, that's not the guitar for you.
Yeah, I was.
I would pay attention to that.
Yeah, it's so true. I played when I was in New York. Actually, I bought an orchestra model from Mandolin Brothers, and it played beautifully in the store.
Yeah,
and when I got it home, it actually played like an absolute dog. And I was so frustrated with the bloody thing because, of course, it cost me $2,500 or something, and I ended up giving that away.
Yeah.
I ended up giving it away because I think I'm a bit altruistic. I don't know. I suppose I believe in you put these things out in the ether, you get them back. So I thought if I give the guitar away to somebody who really needs it and somebody who's actually a really good performer but doesn't have a good one of their own, and it turns out this guitar suits them beautifully. So I thought, well, that's good. I couldn't have sold it for much more than $500 or $600 over here anyway. There just isn't the demand for Martin these days in Australia, unfortunately. I don't know what's happened to them recently, but
so what I would say is me for finger style guitar, I actually like mahogany as the tone wood versus like a rosewood, because I think it gives this more true tone, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the top, you're going after, if you want something more articulate, then you want to do a spruce guitar top. But I think some of those old Martins are great style guitars, like you described.
Yeah, the old ones are great.
Aren't wonderful.
Yeah, the old ones are great. Just the new ones, the ones that have been made in the last 10 years or so, just like, honestly, I love my bass, actually, my acoustic bass by Martin, which I bought at Guitar Center there in Manhattan. And I bought all these things over there when the Australian dollar had parity, so I was getting a really good deal. So I went over there and bought a couple of guitars, and that's beautiful, but that was made, I bought that second hand, so that was made in the early 2000s or so. I just noticed some of their stuff recently. I'm personally not that big a fan of it, and I've played a lot of it, and I am a big Martin fan historically, but you got the older ones. I had the privilege of playing a guitar that was about 80 years old, I think, when I was in there. And that thing played like an absolute song.
Yeah, those are incredible.
Yeah, it felt like porcelain, doesn't it? They feel really weird. They feel their resonance is unlike anything else you can hear. Like you play a chord and it's just beautiful. It's when they're set up right and everything else, it just resonates into eternity. It's just a beautiful sound, and you feel it vibrating through the rest of your body. But the newer ones, I just find that I had to really work hard to get a decent sound out of it. And when you're playing, I do covers. Very different to what you're doing, obviously, but playing 3 1-hour sets and it's just me and a singer, me on the guitar playing, man, I can tell you by the end of the night I was ready to give it away. So I ended up switching across to... Yeah, it happens. I mean, it's my experience is not unusual, and it could be anybody. It could just be me and the brand, who knows, but I ended up playing an $800 Maton. I don't know whether you've heard of the guitar brand Maton that are made in Melbourne here, but that was a treat. That worked out really well for me, actually, and it could sort of stand having beer spilt on it and all the rest of it. I didn't feel so bad when that happened.
One of the best guitars I have is an old, it's probably from the 60s. Actually, my cousin gave it to me. A guitar that was sold at Sears. And it was inexpensive at the time, but it's aged well. It's got a mahogany back and sides and a spruce top, and it's old Harmony, which at the time is probably a $30 guitar, but it's an amazing guitar. So it's not just like I said, you have to play a lot, and you have to find the guitar that works for you, for what you're doing. The other trick that music stores do that you should always be aware of, they put these coated elixir strings on them.
Yes.
And they sound good in the store, but they get out and they're horrible. So you got to get a good. If you're really going to buy a guitar like that, make them change the strings to something
the average ones
that you would use.
No, you're not
exactly.
wrong, and that's actually, I think you're so right with that. That's actually the reason I use elixir strings. Actually, I graduated to elixir strings after getting so frustrated with some of the other brands that I won't mention, and they just didn't have the life in them. You could feel it after a 3 or 4 hour gig when you're sweating on it. You felt them go lifeless, and you're like, I've only been playing it for 3 or 4 hours. It's not that long, but if it's constantly being played, they don't like it. They don't like it. I don't know where they're made these days and why the quality is diminished. But the elixir strings, to your point, I can't even remember the gauge that I'm using these days. It's been a while since I've played the guitar. Must be said, I've switched across to playing bass a lot more. But the elixir strings just are a treat. They can make an average guitar sound great.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing that I did want to mention our group project, Flow. I don't know if you've listened to any of that stuff, but
I have, yeah.
I've been working with,
the Australian keyboard player.
Go ahead.
The Australian keyboard player that you've been working with, or piano player.
Yeah. So Fiona Joy from Australia, and Will Ackerman on guitar, that's been a really great and interesting experience to play in a band with Will, and then Jeff Oster on flugelhorn. And we've been actually touring the last 2 years. We've played a number of places, but most notably we played Carnegie Hall in New York twice, and we've been invited back to play again in September. So we'll be back in Carnegie Hall, and also doing limited appearances on the East Coast, and then we've got a show in LA all in the fall, all centered around our second album release with Flow.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's stunning music too, by the way. And I'm glad that you are working with the band, because it's, in terms of being able to play in front of a lot of people, that's usually the way to do it. So is there a lot of a demand for you to be performing live? Do you get a lot of agents and managerial types reaching out and checking for your availability?
Yeah, we could be on the road all year if we wanted to be. It's difficult to do that. And especially, with Fiona in Australia, Jeff and I are in San Francisco, and Will's in Vermont. So what we've been doing is pretty limited engagements, but it's a lot of fun playing live. It's quite a thing to play live in a band versus playing live as a solo artist. And I think it's been a great growth experience for all of us to do that. Because, previously we were used to just doing our own thing live, and now we're in this situation where, and what we do with Flow is not, if you listen to Flow, you can hear elements of me and elements of Will and elements of Jeff and Fiona, but it's not what we do as solo artists. It's completely different.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
Yeah. How'd you meet Fiona, being given you're in the US and she's in Australia? I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we're a very well-connected society these days, but did you guys meet through mutual acquaintances, or can you tell me how that friendship or relationship came about?
Yeah, we actually met through Will Ackerman, who has produced 3 albums for me and several albums for Fiona. And so that's how we met. Through Will, and I actually came up with the idea to combine all of our efforts, because I think with acoustic music, there's jazz bands, but there's not really any band that does what we do. And I think there was an opportunity to do that. And I think what happened was we surprised ourselves in that what we thought was going to happen was each of us would bring some songs, and the others would sort of add a little this and that to it. What happened was we all brought songs, and then we all deconstructed our songs, and so they became things that we would have never done on our own. And pretty excited about the results. So if people listening want to check out our Flow album, it's called Flow by Flow, and it's available everywhere on Spotify, and if anyone's still buying CDs, you can buy them through Amazon.
I was going to say, I'd highly recommend that. And unless you've got where I like listening to your music in particular is in the car. And a lot of people tell me that. Yeah, it's beautiful music. It is a very, I don't want this to come across as a cliche, but this is absolutely correct in your case. It's a very calming influence. I mean, roads anywhere in the world these days with traffic are awful. And if you've got something nice in the background that's just sort of taking the edge off a little bit, it's like a fine glass of red wine, your music, I think, and it just takes the edge off a little bit and makes you a little bit more at peace with your surroundings.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there an opportunity that you could come over here and perform?
We've talked about that. I would like to come over to Australia, and Fiona has certainly been lobbying us. So let's see how it goes over the next year or so. But I think we would like to do that for sure.
Yeah, great. I think your music is music that once people hear it once, no matter what their particular preference or style of music they like to go to, they're going to find a lot of value in the music that you're creating, mate. You know that? It's music that is timeless. It isn't representative under any specific genre or label. It's just wonderful music you can put on in a variety of applications, whether you're in the car. I put it on in the morning too when I'm getting the kids' lunches ready before school. I love playing your sort of music and classical music. You don't by any chance have a vinyl edition of any of the releases that you've got, do you?
We don't, and we've also been talking about that. I guess our biggest fear is that we're going to have a garage full of vinyl and end up selling them. But, it's tough. I mean, people don't buy CDs anymore. In fact, I would say 99% of people I know, including myself, don't even own a CD player. But I'm told there is a growing number of people that are interested in vinyl again. And I'm starting to see more vinyl around town here. So it is something we're considering. It may be in a limited run to do that. I think our music would sound great in vinyl. I do like the warmth of especially if you have a receiver with old vacuum tubes in it.
Oh God,
I think they do make a difference.
Oh, massively so. Yeah. The other thing too, it's not really about quality of music here, but cassettes, if you can believe it, have made a big comeback, particularly in heavy metal and hip hop circles. So mixtapes and heavy metal bands, hip hop artists producing mixtapes and heavy metal artists producing EPs and all sorts of interesting combinations of music on cassettes. And I've bought a couple actually from Bandcamp and online, and it's a real thrill for me to share that with my kids actually. And I don't think it'd work. Yeah, I don't think cool. I don't think cassettes would work really well for your music. I think a lot would be lost, but I think vinyl, especially when you're talking about using using a vacuum tube speaker system and a nice turntable, a really good high quality turntable, your music, mate, would just become part of the ether in that environment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So that could be in the cards to do something like that. I think it would be an interesting project to do that.
Indeed. Well, look, we've covered a lot of ground, and is there anything else that you want to share with the listener before we finish up?
No, I appreciate anybody listening to my music, and I'd love to hear from people. I do from time to time about different aspects of how they've listened to my music or used my music in different things. You can check out my website at lawrenceblatt.com, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and certainly you can find me on Spotify and Pandora and probably 20 other music streaming services that I don't even know about. And I just thank everybody and really appreciate when people take the time to listen.
You're an extraordinary artist, mate. Thank you for taking the time to create music. I mean, God knows you got your hands full with a lot of other things, but you choose to make music, and you make beautiful music. So anybody listening, I implore you to just go along to Lawrence's socials or his website, especially support him by purchasing a CD. But look, just listen to the music really any way that you can, because it's the sort of music that I think will certainly be a very big positive to your day.
Thank you so much.
That's all right, mate. So look, what I'll do... You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name is Andrew Mackay Smith, and that interview subject was Lawrence Blatt. Thank you so much for listening.